Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jessica Hubbard, and I will be your host today. Today's discussion is around the recently formed COVID-19 debt relief funds and how they apply to various businesses in South Africa. I'm joined by Nadia and Zahra Rawjee, the founders and directors of Uzenzele. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Pleasure to be here.
Nadia and Zahra, can you just take us through what Uzenzele does? I'd love to start off with an explanation of your name.
Sure. So Uzenzele means to do things for yourself. And we established our business 10 years ago as a CSI project within a family business. And over time, we moved it into a commercialized business, helping SMEs, primarily medium-sized manufacturing businesses, in accessing expansion capital. So for the past 10 years, we've really been raising finance in the market and doing it through structured solutions between grants, loans, and other forms of finance, both commercial and developmental. So we're really here today to share what over the past 2 weeks we've learned through our networks, through the different financial institutions around their programs, their relief funds for business owners, and have a conversation really to empower businesses to understand the different tools in the shed that are available to help them stay in business over this difficult time and ensure that they're around after COVID to get back into business and be fully functional.
Absolutely. And there's naturally a lot of anxiety right now as businesses struggle to find ways to keep running. We're seeing almost daily new funds and new grants announced. And I think there's a lot of confusion out in the marketplace right now in terms of who can apply, what are these funds for, are they truly accessible, and where will this all leave businesses as we come out of the lockdown. So I'm going to share my screen shortly, and we'll try and clarify some of these points together. I'm just going to go. 1 second. Okay. There we go. Hope everyone can see my screen. Nadia, let's start off with who are the COVID-19 relief and business funds for? Can you take us through the various funds and what they mean?
Sure. So really, they're for businesses primarily who are registered entities, who have kept up with their compliance. So a lot of the relief funds are looking at businesses who have financials, who have their tax clearance, who have management accounts, and where the relief fund can assess that this business was sustainable before COVID, and that it's really because of COVID that the business is going through a difficult time. Other things are, for example, where it's the commercial banks and other funders, they want to see that these are good paying clients that have been paying their debts in the past and now need that relief. There are a few funds that are coming online now for sole proprietors and for the informal sector, but by and large, the primary funds available are for established entities who are looking to support their staff through UIF, support their repayments, their rent, etc., to remain operational in the sense that their infrastructure, both talent and fixed, are still in place for when COVID has passed. I think, Zahra, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so that primarily refers to, of course, the relief funds. And what's important is that there's two types of funds in the market. So Nadia touched on the relief funds, but there's also business funds for those businesses that are supplying essential goods, that are seeing that they need to supply the market with medical equipment for this pandemic that we're in at the moment. And so manufacturers that need to up their production of, maybe, for example, you make masks or hand sanitizers or even food. So food is an essential item. All these sorts of businesses that need to keep going during this crisis and require some assistance in order to do that. There's also funds available to them.
So do we need to go into each fund and sort of tackle the baseline requirements for businesses to access these funds? Are the requirements different for each fund, or is there a checklist that every business would need to fulfill that covers most of these funds?
So we can go through some of the holistic criteria as such. There are some of the funds. So for example, the Department of Small Business funds are for businesses where there is a 100% ownership by South Africans. So South African citizens must own the business, and 70% of the employees must be South African as well. Where on the flip side, you'll have, for example, the Rupert and Remgrow Fund, which is being administered by business partners, where the requirement around South African citizens isn't the same. We've also got, so currently there are 13 different cash related incentives and relief funds, and it totals around 8 billion Rand worth of capital that's been mobilized in the past few weeks. I think, Zahra, was there something that you specifically wanted to go through? And you can...
Yeah, I think the important thing, so there isn't necessarily a standard checklist that applies across the board for all the different funds. You're dealing with Department of Small Business Development, which is being administered primarily through SEFA, which is the Small Enterprise Finance Agency. You've got the IDC, you've got the NEF, then you've got your private funders like Business Partners administering the Rupert and Remgrow Fund. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the principles of accessing funding and understanding whether a business is a good business to support in this regard remain the same. So having your compliance in check, being a good taxpayer, so having all of your elements of tax, your revenue, your VAT, your UIF, PAYE,
yes,
taxation commission, all of that contributes towards you being a good taxpayer.
So can I just jump in quickly? What if I'm a small business who's just been really busy over the past year and my books just are not up to date right now? I'm tax compliant, but in terms of my financials, I'm definitely not on the current side. Would something like that be a roadblock?
It would certainly be a roadblock, but there are still incentives and relief funds that you can apply for. So, for example, and looking at this a little bit more holistically, looking at it and saying, well, if I'm a business owner, I have certain expenses and certain exposures, even in a personal capacity, which I can reduce by calling the bank. If you've got a bond, if you've got a vehicle installment, call the bank, whether it's in your personal name or where it's in the business's name. If you've got those facilities, pick up the phone, speak to your bank, and get an extension. So what most of the commercial banks are doing is allowing for up to a 3-month payment moratorium or payment holiday, which means you don't pay in those 3 months. The interest does accumulate over those 3 months. So it means that you're basically pushing out your repayments over that period. But you can do that. You can get your staff to do that as well. And all of those cash flow items become a reduction on the exposure that you have as a business. So for example, one of our clients gave us advice and said, right, I really don't believe that I can do very much for my staff. I'm really in a pickle. What do I do? And this is a relatively, high turnover business, couple of tens of millions a year. And we said, well, look, what you can do is, first of all, get your staff onto UIF. Now, with the UIF relief that's available, the maximum amount is 17,000 Rand per employee. And he said, well, what do I do about my managers who are sitting with a vehicle loan and a bond? What are they going to do? 17,000 Rand isn't sufficient. They ordinarily earn 30 or 50 or 60,000 Rand a month. Said, well, speak to your staff, let them go out as well and speak to their bank so that, you know, there can be relief from that perspective. That reduces the strain on the business owner and entrepreneur between looking at private institutions, the commercial banks to help your employees and yourself in a personal capacity, as well as UIF. Now, yes, Jess.
Can I just pop in here in terms of, do we need to define what a small business is within the parameters of this discussion? So can you be too small to participate in some of these funds?
So typically speaking, most of the funds are looking for at least 1 year of track record and up to 25 to 50 million Rand in turnover. So there isn't a per se too small to participate, but certainly, you know, if you've just started in business, I think it would be very challenging for the relief funds to understand whether you were sustainable prior to COVID. If you don't have, you know, and that's really what it comes down to, is the funds, the principle of these funds is we're helping businesses that were sustainable already to be able to pick up the economy once we're through the health crisis that we're in, and be in a position to actually get back into business and hit the road running. So that's who the funds are primarily available to. I think, Zahra, you want to add something?
Yeah, so while there isn't necessarily a business that's too small, there can be a business that is, in some cases, for some of the relief funds, too big. So a lot of the relief funds are saying, you know, you need to have, you know, it's available to businesses that are turning over less than 20 million Rand a year or less than 50 million Rand a year.
Yes.
It is looking to assist. If you look at the broader definition of an SME, the broader definition of an SME typically takes you to a business that's turning over 50 million Rand or less.
So if we get back into the actual nitty-gritty of these funds, how would you know how much is actually available for your business, depending on who you are and what kind of fund you're applying for? Is that quite clear upfront?
So it's not necessarily quite clear upfront. It really comes down to understanding your own business. Let's say, for example, you're looking for relief funds. So there, it's about certain costs that you need to make sure you're going to be able to cover. So things like salaries, like rent. So that's not a loan for you to grow your business. That's a loan for you to make sure that you can sustain your business. So knowing your numbers is very important. Then you've got the flip side where you're saying, for example, I'm a manufacturer. I need to suddenly, you know, I was making 10,000 bottles of hand sanitizer a month. I need to now make 1 million bottles. My raw material cost has gone up. So how much money do you need in order to bring in additional raw material, potentially bring in a few more staff in order to do that, to do the manufacturing of these hand sanitizers, the logistics component. So you're going to need additional delivery vehicles, either rented or I can't imagine anyone's going to be able to buy a new truck at the moment. So you're going to need to outsource that from companies that are doing so. So it is still extremely important to understand the financial aspect of what it is you require. And that's what's going to determine whereabouts on the value of funding you can access you will be sitting.
Will this also depend, sorry Nadia, will this also depend on your ability to make a strong case and to identify all the specific areas in your business that are going to receive the funding? So does it depend on your stance as well and how you argue it almost?
It certainly does. Like Zahra said, it comes down to knowing your numbers, knowing what you need the funding for, and being able to communicate that very clearly which again is why, you know, the requirement for financial statements and management accounts is critical. And then certainly as well, from a tax compliance and a UIF compliance perspective, the funds and the incentives are saying for those who have been paying their taxes, we're going to now be in a position to help you as well. So that's really what it comes down to at the moment.
So what if you find that, say, your tax is not up to date, or you're not able to make a strong enough case based on your current numbers? What if you don't qualify for the relief funds? What would your advice be then to businesses who really need to find a way to get through this?
So some of the things clients are doing currently is, for example, they're saying they having conversations with their suppliers and with their customers. So they may be going and sending some of their stock back to suppliers so that they don't affect their current exposure with those suppliers. Say, for example, you have stock of R1 million that you can't actually sell during this period. Instead of holding that stock, make an arrangement with the suppliers and figure that out. So your you know, there is cover that's coming in from your through credit insurance, etc. So it's really having a conversation with your stakeholders. On the supply side, what can you actually send back, or have a conversation with them to say, obviously with the situation we're in, what arrangements can we come up with? Can you hold the you know, the account that we have currently, etc. On the customer side, it's very much about seeing how can I collect from my different customers. And then with employees and staff complement, as you said, is having them contact their banks, see how far down they can reduce their exposure, their cash flow requirements over this period. And I think that's something that I find that a lot of business owners at the moment are just trying to get their heads around all of this. And the next step is, you know, we need to empower, as business owners, we need to empower ourselves and empower our employees to be able to help us. This crisis, this pandemic where we're sitting, is not an employer-employee typical relationship where the employer is typically the one who needs to find the solutions. I think it's about changing that paradigm and saying, you know, we're in this together, and we're seeing this from government, private sector coming together, knocking down what would be ordinarily political or business differences, and saying we're in this together as a society. And as business, we are a society, we're a community. We need to help each other, we need to help our employees, and our employees need to help us so that we can all get through this together.
Absolutely. So before we go into the questions, and I can see there are a lot of questions being sent through here, how do business owners actually go about accessing these funds? Is it very administratively heavy? Can you provide some advice around that?
So what has happened is that a lot of these funds, I know that the IDC, the NEF, the Department of Small Business Development, what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce the barriers. So they're trying to make it a little bit simpler, and they're looking at how can they speed track their processes. Especially government departments are somewhat notorious for taking their time, but they are all on a drive. I've spoken to some of the deal makers at the IDC, and they've said that they are on a drive. They have been told that they need to speed this up because funding needs to go out. We need to make sure that products are available in the market that are required, and that businesses are able to receive the support that they require. So in terms of accessing the funding, each organization has its own requirements. Some of them have application forms, others require you to submit a plan. Understanding what each of these institutions are looking for is important.
So what we'll be doing is after the session as well, I mean, businesses are welcome, and please, you know, we'll be sending out a list of the different funds that are currently available with websites on them. One of the questions you asked, Jess, is, what are the values. Each of these websites has an eligibility criteria, gives you your range of how much you can qualify for, and everyone can go and do their own applications. Alternatively, they can also contact us and we can support through that process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nadia. I think we'll go to the questions now. I can see there are a lot of questions coming in. In terms of the fees, let me see here. What are the fees involved from the relevant facilitators? So I guess people are trying to find the downsides here and the fine line or the fine print. Can we just discuss the fees and any negatives towards applying for these funds?
Sure. So we're still in the process of finalizing our fee structure. What we've taken as a decision as Uzenzele is to utilize our resources and capacity, both internally and through our networks, to support businesses through this crisis on an as low as possible rate. We will be in a position to start servicing and supporting clients as of next week. So we are looking at it. It does need to obviously cover costs, but we are looking at it as a social responsibility project for ourselves. However, there are costs and it will be on a commercial basis.
Okay, great. Another interesting question that's just come in. If I'm currently applying for funding with the IDC, will this impact my application? And will the IDC carry on lending?
Great question, Zahra.
These are separate applications. If you're applying to the IDC for COVID funding, that's a separate application. It's got its own terms, and it's generally with the IDC, the COVID funding is a 48-month facility. So it's relatively short. It's about determining, what it is that you're applying for funding for. Of course, it needs to be analyzed properly. If you are already in discussions with a deal maker, with one of the SBUs, the strategic business units at the IDC, have a call with them, ask them what your options are. In principle, it should not impact too much, because remembering that if you're applying to the IDC for something specific related to COVID, it's for that specific thing, whereas your other application probably and should relate to your business more generally, holistically, and more long-term than just the COVID funding.
Okay. And in terms of sectors, for example, the tourism sector, which has been particularly hard hit, do you know of any tourism-specific sector support measures?
Yes, there is a Department of Tourism support measure that's come in. It's a 200 million Rand fund. And just going to go into the detail over here. So really, it's for businesses that are turning over a maximum of 2.5 million Rand and who are Black owned. Again, I think that what the big lesson that we'd like to share, or information that we'd like to share with the audience, is that there are still, so UIF covers anyone that has been paying their UIF. There's the banks that you can call. So if you're in the tourism sector and you have a property that's bonded, speak to your bank immediately. That's immediate relief that can be done. We've had clients that have made calls to the bank and have gotten relief. So I think it's very much about there's no one silver bullet, if I can put it that way. It's about understanding the different tools in the shed. UIF, very important. Calling your banks, very important. Over and above that, the relief funds are there then to support on things like rent, etc. But typically the relief funds are limited to around the 1 million to 10 million Rand mark at best. So the relief funds that are very specific to relieving businesses at this stage are not of a very high value. And the reason for that, I believe, is that government is also saying they've had the conversations with commercial banks. Commercial banks are coming to the party. UIF is there. So as business owners, it's about unpacking those options and really, utilizing them. And my recommendation is UIF, speak to your labor consultants, speak to your accountants. They know what they need to do around the UIF side. And if they don't, let us know, and we can refer you to some of the service providers that we use for our clients.
Okay, I'd just like to address one or two very specific queries that are coming through. One of them, a company owner is saying, our company is registered and has been in business since 2017. We are tax compliant. Our cash flow has been covering our overheads such as bonds, utilities, and car payments. We are tender consultants, and since there is no tender closing during this time, our business has been declined. Our business has declined. Do you think we will get financial assistance?
Definitely, that sounds like it.
Yeah, if you tax compliance and all of that, as well as you're owned by South African citizens, and you have your 70% of your staff complement is South African, the SMME debt relief fund is there, the one from Department of Small Business Development.
So over and above that, so you've got two other options as well. So for your staff, there is the South African, sorry, we work in acronyms, so I'm just going to read it out to you. SA Future Trust, which is the Oppenheimer Fund. It's R1 billion relief fund that's been allocated to the banks who are administering it. And effectively it's for your staff, so you can call into the bank and obtain relief for your staff. The other thing you can do is get in touch with your bank for your bond. And then over and above that, there are other funds, for example, the Business Partners Fund, which then doesn't look at only at South African citizens, but a broader base of possible.
That was one of the very interesting questions that just came in, Nadia, in terms of the proviso that South African citizens have to own businesses. The question was, does that include South African holding companies and trusts?
So in terms of South African holding companies, it does. I think that it just comes down to understanding, what size businesses they are. But irrespective, as a South African holding company, you would be in a position, if you're able to justify why your business has suffered, your banks would be able to assist you. You've got the UIF, etc. So I think, some of the cases are a little bit more intricate, so understanding a bit more context around that is very important for us.
Yes. It does sound like it will get complex for some businesses, especially as they're under pressure at this time. So will Uzenzele be helping businesses apply for these types of funds if the businesses don't quite understand the process or have the capacity? Is that something you'll be doing?
That's exactly what we will be doing. So we will be doing it for businesses, typically speaking, who are turning over more than 5 million rand. Just so that there are some economics around that assistance that we provide.
And of course, we'll start off by unpacking the criteria and making sure that all the initial qualifying criteria are met. And if that is the case, then we take it to the next step and say, okay, what are the options? Which funder makes most sense? Which fund makes most sense for that business? And help them through that process of applying.
Great, thanks guys. I think we're going to have to close off shortly. Do you want to just make one or two closing comments? From the sounds of it, it seems like businesses do have many tools available to them. It just depends on business owners being proactive and actually taking this into their own hands and looking for solutions, as opposed to sitting back and seeing how this all pans out.
Yeah, I would like to say the following. One is, it's a tough time for everyone, and this isn't business as usual. I'd urge business owners to understand that a lot of these funds have come online in the past week or two. Typically, something like this takes months to put together. These funds, you know, the financiers, the individuals or companies are providing funding. Typically, you know, first come up with an idea, then put together their thoughts, put together a program before, and then it's announced to the market. It's available for comment. We're in unprecedented times. This whole process has been obviously has unfolded very differently to what the normal case would be for a new fund. So yes, there may be some issues in submitting applications, in getting hold of the financiers. Just understand that they are also overwhelmed to a great degree. They are also figuring out and troubleshooting along the way. But they've said, you know what, let's get what we can out to the market as quickly as possible. And so we need to be a little bit patient with them, and also keep an eye out. There are going to be more funds coming online. There are going to be more relief options coming online. We will also, you know, do our best to keep abreast and share information of what is available when it comes to the fore, through our blogs or our social media. Yeah, it's an evolving situation. So just be aware of that and keep that in mind as you do engage with financiers, and with your clients, with your customers, etc.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. And to all our listeners, we will be circulating the playback link so that you can access this recording.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.